Well, we do have this situation, this troubling one you just saw there in Ukraine. Russia trying to ramp up its mobilisation and even talking a threat of nuclear attack. Joining me live is Chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, Labor's Peter Khalil. Thanks very much for your time. More assistance from Australia? I know there's some assistance, I know there's more slated, but does this announcement make you think, what else can we do? Is that the first question for the government?
Yeah, well, the government's engaged in that conversation. I know that our Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister has been talking to his defence counterpart. We know that Foreign Minister Wong is in the United Nations as we speak, obviously engaging with her Ukrainian counterparts as well. It is, in my view, Tom, the international community needs to continue to support Ukraine at this critical juncture of the war. And we are the largest NATO military contributor, almost $400 million, and this government has continued that from the previous government and added a bit more as well. So those conversations are happening, and my view would be that we should be supporting in every way possible, lethal as well as non-lethal aid. I mean, there are little things like, there's an Australian company that makes drones, little cardboard drones. They're built in Fisherman's Bend in Victoria, and they're sold to Ukraine or sent to Ukraine, and they can drop a 3-kilo payload of blood for troops or rat packs or whatever. It's things like that that add up, and we should really consider additional aid.
When you said 3-kilo payload, I was thinking that sounds lethal to me, but blood, okay, so yeah, that can save lives.
You could use that.
Other things I'm sure could come from them, but well, it is a war after all. So it's an interesting test for China, isn't it? It's keeping Russia going. I mean, China pulled the rug out from underneath Russia. This wouldn't really be able to continue. President Xi has a lot of power over Putin. How he uses it will be interesting.
It was very interesting, particularly the summit in Uzbekistan. The comments I found odd from Putin, where he said he noted the concerns and the issues raised by President Xi.
Well, he was basically forced to make them, don't we assume?
Yeah, well, look, the question in my mind is the Chinese government sort of dissatisfied with the way the war's going and the way that Putin is prosecuting that war and is really trying to push them in a different direction? Have they sort of moved away from Putin to a certain extent? You've seen the comments from the Foreign Minister, Wang, who talked about the need to respect sovereign integrity, the need to de-escalate. This was just in New York in the last 24 hours. So that's encouraging, I should say, Tom, because if China can play a more positive role in pulling Putin back, that is positive for everyone.
It could be an interesting step, and I'm not saying from then on it will be, holding hands and kumbaya, but it might be an interesting step where China's getting praised on the world stage.
It's an important step. I said this the other day. I think it's important that both India and China play a really constructive role in trying to de-escalate this conflict. And so the statements both by the Chinese, but also by Prime Minister Modi, have been very encouraging. Prime Minister Modi was very clear with Putin at in that meeting as well about the need to engage in diplomacy and the importance of democracy. And Putin was quite tense in that response by saying he would try and finish the war as soon as possible. Of course, that's not his agenda in that respect.
He wanted a 10-day war, basically. Let's go to the comments from Joe Biden. He said this for a fourth time, and this was emphatic. After back and forth in an interview, he kept saying it. The US will defend Taiwan if attacked by China. What did you make of that comment?
Look, you're right. It was the fourth time that the president has made those kinds of statements. I think
it's just time to take the statement at face value, isn't it? Rather than pretend there's another policy they have and then something the president says.
Look, I was just in the US last week and had meetings at the White House and with various agencies and so on. The policy officially of strategic ambiguity is still there, but it really clearly, from the president's own mouth, there is an intent that's being shown around hardening up the defence of Taiwan and the intent around the importance of defending Taiwan from any future, as the president called it, unprecedented military attack. We all, I think the US and Australia and other countries want to see, don't want to see any conflict in the region.
Of course.
Want to see a reduction in tensions.
Of course. But when you talk about that policy, so yes, they have this official policy of strategic ambiguity as a general rule when it comes to Taiwan and China. But clearly what's emerged on top of that is that if China specifically attacks Taiwan, the US will defend it. Is that what you see as the US policy now?
Well, you've got to ask the US about that in the president's own statements.
But I'm just asking
at face value. I would say then rather than dealing in hypotheticals, the work that's being done around ensuring that there is a reduction in tensions, a reducing of the factors that may contribute to conflict, and that includes enhancing military capability, intelligence and security, so that it deters the option of conflict down the track. People
Again,
sort of misunderstand that. They think that, if you're advancing your defence and your preparedness, that is a sign of building up for war. It's actually the opposite. It's trying to deter the idea or the possibility of conflict.
That's the idea. Of course, sometimes it shrinks the window and it makes the possible attacker think, well, they're going to have this much capability in 3, 4, 5 years. Now's our time to go. And that can be the actual effect.
Yeah, I've said publicly as well, I actually think it is not in China's interest, certainly, to go down that path. The impact on the global economy, but just as importantly from the Chinese perspective, the impact on China's economy would be disastrous. All the gains that Xi's administration have made over the past 10 years, the gains of economic reform, would be put at great jeopardy.
Does Australia need to listen to those Biden comments, though, and consider our own view on what would happen with the Chinese attack on Taiwan?
Our view is very, very clear, and the Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister have been very, very clear about the need to reduce tensions, to work constructively in the region towards peaceful negotiations with respect to Taiwan and the Taiwan Straits. That hasn't changed, and I think that is the right policy.
Peter Khalil, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tom.